Hey everybody, welcome to the Basis Points Podcast. I'm Kevin Flanagan, head of fixed income strategy at WisdomTree Asset Management. And I am delighted to have a guest, the WisdomTree CIO for fixed income and models, Rick Harper. Rick, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
So a special edition, I would call it, for Basis Points. Something that we're very excited about is that we are launching 2 new municipal funds. And Rick, I wanted to get your input on them since I call you the architect behind these funds. So first up, when you're looking at the interest rate environment where we're at now, I like to talk about we're back to quote unquote normal levels, but something a generation of investors really are not familiar with. So why munis and why now?
Well, first, the high levels of after-tax income relative to other taxable fixed income alternatives. Very strong diversification benefits within multi-asset class portfolios, much higher credit quality than corporates with much lower default rates and higher recovery rates. And the fact that really I don't think is truly appreciated by a lot of people is there's a much greater resiliency in municipals relative to other fixed income asset classes in rising rate environments. So those 4 points together make a very strong case for why munis now.
Absolutely. And what we're talking about here are the WisdomTree Core Laddered Municipal Fund, and the ticker there is WTMU, and the WisdomTree High Income Laddered Municipal Fund, ticker WTMY. And that leads me to my next question, Rick. Why laddered? Why do we feel a laddered approach or strategy makes sense for the fixed income investor, especially in the muni market?
Yeah, it's simple, it's disciplined and effective. Advisors have been recommending this strategy for decades. And what a ladder does is simply distributes exposure across maturity rungs such that principal is consistently being reinvested. In the case of the muni markets, most often lower yielding bonds mature and you're investing in higher yielding bonds at the top of the ladder. So you really leverage the upward slope of the muni curve.
Rick, when we're looking at the underlying factors within the funds, within, say, the laddered part of the approach, what part of the curve are we concentrating on? And then for the high income solution, what are we concentrating or what's the focus there?
Okay, for WTMU, which is a core laddered fund, we're focusing on the intermediate part of the curve from 0 to 15 years out on the curve. And we're diversifying exposure through the ladder approach across that. Then on top of that, we're adding active credit selection, which we believe in a fragmented market can add a great deal of value. This is largely going to be your bread and butter investment grade fund with at least 90% in investment grade. And Obligor exposure capped at 10%, and state exposure capped at 25%. Now, for the high income, essentially we're combining the investment grade ladder with a targeted allocation to high yield municipal bonds, which often are a little bit further out of the curve and might extend the maturity range just a bit. And the focus for this fund is on delivering value through active credit selection. And it's going to be capped at 50% non-investment grade, and it's going to be at least 90% in credits rated A or below.
So I think the other key attribute here, which will be setting these approaches apart, is the active strategy and who we're using to do the active strategy on this front. And I know that you're going to talk a little bit about that here. And I wanted to just mention what I think is important here, that we're talking about an active manager here, Insight Investments, that date back to 1933. And Rick and I, before we went on, I was joking, you got to go back to the original King Kong movie for that. So give us a sense here, a little bit of Insight and their active approach.
Yeah, I think one of the things you got to remember about the muni market is it's a really fragmented market. If you look at the Bloomberg Municipal Bond Index, there's over 3,000 obligors to do credit research upon. So it really takes a steady hand with a real focus on credit research to deliver value through active credit selection within the muni market. You're really dealing with an institutional manager in a largely retail-based space. And we have found that timely, comprehensive credit research is done by Inside Management, which is part of the larger Inside investment, which runs about $750 billion across the world, truly can deliver that value within the municipal market.
And I think, what better way to underscore with the headlines we continue to see hitting the markets on a regular basis to take an active approach with a manager that's been around. I mean, like I said, you're talking on, almost 90 years or over 90 years or so. It's just an incredible, I think, attribute for the fund. So that was great, Rick. Thanks a lot. We're really excited about these two new muni funds and what we like to consider to be some differentiated approaches within this space and solutions. And certainly as we go forward, Rick, we want to continue to have this dialogue, have you back on. So everybody, be well and have a great rest of the week.